In the age of Instagram and social media stardom, where a single post can make someone famous overnight, Nikki Bhati was living what many would consider the modern dream. A successful beauty entrepreneur with thousands of followers, she ran a thriving parlor with her sister, their feeds filled with stunning transformations and glamorous looks. But on August 21st, 2025, at 5:30 in the evening, that dream became a nightmare when Nikki was allegedly doused in flammable liquid and set ablaze in her own home. As she stumbled down the stairs, her body consumed by flames, a voice could be heard asking the question that would haunt investigators for months. What have you done? This is the story of how beauty became a burden, how success sparked jealousy, and how the very platforms that promised liberation may have led to destruction. It's a tale that exposes the dark underbelly of modern marriage, where ancient prejudices collide with digital age freedoms, and where the price of independence can sometimes be paid in blood. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Sirsa village in Greater Noida, where traditional brick houses stood alongside newer concrete structures, symbols of a community caught between old ways and new aspirations. Here, in this corner of Uttar Pradesh where rural sensibilities mixed uneasily with urban ambitions, the Bhati family compound represented everything that modern India promised to its young couples. Prosperity through hard work, respect through success, and freedom through financial independence. But beneath the surface of this seeming prosperity lay currents of tension that would ultimately prove deadly. Nikki Bhati, born into a family that believed in the power of education and entrepreneurship, had married Vipin Bhati in 2016 with all the hope and optimism that young love brings. At the time, it seemed like a perfect match. Both families were well established in Greater Noida. Both believed in the importance of business success, and both appeared to embrace the idea that their daughters-in-law could pursue careers alongside their domestic duties. Nikki's family had provided what was considered a generous dowry: a Scorpio SUV, a motorcycle, and substantial jewelry, all symbols of their respect for the union and their hopes for their daughter's future happiness. Together with her sister Kanchan, who had also married into the extended Bhati family, Nikki had built something remarkable. Their beauty parlor was more than just a business. It was a statement of independence, creativity, and modern womanhood. The sisters worked side by side, transforming their clients and sharing their expertise through carefully curated Instagram posts that attracted thousands of followers. Their feeds were filled with before and after photos, makeup tutorials, and glimpses into the glamorous world they were creating for themselves and their clients. But what appeared to outsiders as a modern success story was, according to later allegations, becoming a source of increasing tension within the Bhati household. The very qualities that made Nikki successful in her business, her confidence, her public presence, her social media savvy, were apparently becoming sources of conflict with her husband and his family. In a culture where women's visibility has traditionally been controlled and limited, Nikki's growing online presence represented a challenge to established hierarchies and expectations. The first signs of serious trouble allegedly came in the form of renewed dowry demands. Despite the substantial gifts provided at the time of marriage, the Bhati family reportedly began asking for more: 36 lakhs in cash and a luxury car. These demands, according to Nikki's family, were accompanied by increasing restrictions on the sisters' business activities and their social media presence. The very success that should have brought pride to the family was instead becoming a source of resentment and conflict. Vipin Bhati and his family, according to the allegations that would later emerge, objected to the sisters' Instagram posts, their beauty-related content, and their growing public profiles. In their view, apparently married women should not be so visible, so independent, so successful in their own right. The ancient concept of female modesty was colliding with modern notions of entrepreneurial success, and the tension was becoming unbearable for everyone involved. On August 20th, 2025, this simmering conflict allegedly erupted into violence. According to later testimony from Kanchan, both sisters were beaten by their husbands and in-laws in what appeared to be a coordinated assault designed to force them into submission. The attack was so severe, so frightening, that it should have prompted immediate police intervention. But like countless women before them, Nikki and Kanchan chose not to report the assault, held back by the social stigma that still surrounds domestic violence and the fear that involving authorities might make their situations even worse. This decision, understandable as it was given the cultural pressures they faced, would prove to be tragically fatal. The silence that protected family honor would ultimately cost Nikki her life. The next evening, August 21st, began like any other summer day in Greater Noida. The heat was oppressive, the kind of weather that drives people indoors during the afternoon hours and brings them out again only as the sun begins to set. In the Bhati family compound, the routines of daily life continued as they had for years. But beneath the surface normalcy, according to the allegations that would soon emerge, a coordinated plan was being set into motion that would transform an ordinary evening into a scene of unimaginable horror. At approximately 5:30 in the evening, as families across the region were preparing their evening meals and children were returning from their after-school activities, Nikki Bhati was allegedly attacked in her own home. According to the investigation that followed, she was doused with a flammable liquid and set ablaze in what prosecutors would later characterize as a premeditated murder disguised as an accident. The attack was captured partially on video, footage that would become crucial evidence in the case that followed. In these disturbing recordings, Nikki can be seen stumbling down the stairs of her home, her body engulfed in flames, while in the background, a woman's voice, believed to be that of her sister Kanchan, can be heard asking the haunting question, "What have you done?" These words, spoken in a moment of shock and horror, would become the central mystery around which the entire investigation would revolve. The emergency response was swift, but ultimately futile. Nikki was rushed first to Fortis Hospital in Greater Noida, where doctors immediately recognized the severity of her condition. Burns covered 70% of her body, injuries so extensive that the local facility was not equipped to handle them. She was quickly referred to Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi, one of the region's premier medical centers, but the journey that should have been a race against time to save her life instead became her final moments. Nikki Bhati died en route to Delhi, her dreams of independence and success ending not in celebration, but in agony. The immediate aftermath of Nikki's death was marked by confusion, conflicting accounts, and what would later appear to be attempts to cover up the true circumstances of her demise. The Bhati family initially claimed that Nikki had died as a result of a gas cylinder explosion, a common enough household accident that would have required no further investigation. Hospital records supported the presence of burn injuries consistent with an explosion, lending credence to this explanation and potentially closing the case before it had properly begun. But Kanchan, Nikki's sister and business partner, had a very different story to tell. According to her account, what had happened to Nikki was no accident but a deliberate act of murder, carried out by her husband Vipin and his family as the ultimate punishment for her refusal to submit to their demands and abandon her independence. This allegation would transform what appeared to be a tragic accident into one of the most controversial murder cases in recent memory. On August 22nd, just one day after Nikki's death, an FIR was registered at Kasna police station. The charges were serious and wide-ranging: murder, causing hurt, and criminal conspiracy. The complaint painted a picture of systematic harassment, escalating demands, and ultimately premeditated murder. 4 people were named as accused: Vipin Bhati, Nikki's husband, his mother Daya, his father Satvir, and his brother Rohit. The entire nuclear family, according to the allegations, had been complicit in the campaign of harassment that had led to Nikki's death. The arrests that followed were dramatic, and in one case, nearly tragic themselves. As police moved to apprehend the accused family members, Vipin Bhati allegedly attempted to escape custody. In the ensuing confrontation, he was shot in the leg by police officers, an incident that added another layer of controversy to an already complex case. The shooting raised questions about police procedures and the use of force, but it also served to demonstrate the seriousness with which authorities were treating the allegations against the Bhati family. As the investigation began in earnest, a pattern of conflicting evidence and contradictory accounts quickly emerged. The case that had initially seemed straightforward, with clear accusations and obvious suspects, was revealing itself to be far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Electronic evidence, hospital records, and CCTV footage were all being analyzed, but each new piece of information seemed to raise more questions than it answered. The hospital memo documenting Nikki's injuries supported the explosion theory, noting burn patterns consistent with a blast rather than deliberate immersion in flammable liquid. But police investigators found no evidence of an actual gas cylinder explosion at the scene, no debris or damage that would have been consistent with such an incident. The physical evidence at the crime scene seemed to contradict the medical evidence, creating a puzzle that forensic experts struggled to solve. Meanwhile, the video evidence captured by Kanchan was being subjected to intense scrutiny. The footage showed Nikki engulfed in flames, but it did not clearly show how the fire had started or who, if anyone, had been responsible for igniting it. The audio of Kanchan's voice asking, "What have you done?" could be interpreted in multiple ways. Was she addressing the perpetrators of a deliberate attack, or was she simply expressing shock at a terrible accident? The investigation was further complicated by the family dynamics at play. Neighbors and relatives provided conflicting accounts of the relationships within the Bhati household. Some described a pattern of escalating conflict over dowry demands and the sisters' business activities. Others painted a picture of a normal family dealing with the usual stresses of modern married life. The truth, as often happens in such cases, seemed to lie somewhere between these competing narratives. As the case attracted media attention, it quickly became a flashpoint for broader debates about women's rights, domestic violence, and the role of social media in modern relationships. Nikki's Instagram account, with its thousands of followers and carefully curated images of success and independence, became a symbol of the challenges facing young women trying to navigate between traditional expectations and modern aspirations. Women's rights activists seized on the case as an example of the deadly consequences of trying to control women's autonomy and independence. They pointed to the alleged dowry demands and restrictions on Nikki's business activities as evidence of the continuing oppression faced by Indian women, even in supposedly progressive families and communities. Protests were organized, demanding justice for Nikki and stronger protection for women facing domestic violence. But the case also attracted criticism and skepticism from those who questioned whether the allegations against the Bhati family were accurate. Some pointed to the lack of clear physical evidence supporting the murder theory, the conflicting medical and forensic reports, and the possibility that family tensions and grief might have led to false accusations. The complexity of the evidence made it difficult for the public to form clear opinions about what had really happened to Nikki Bhati. The investigation took another significant turn when police began examining the digital footprint left by all parties involved. Nikki's social media accounts were analyzed for signs of distress or conflict in the months leading up to her death. Her posts were scrutinized for hidden messages or indications that she felt threatened or unsafe. Similarly, the accounts of Vipin and other family members were examined for any evidence of planning or conspiracy. What investigators found was a complex picture that defied easy categorization. Nikki's posts showed a confident, successful young woman enjoying her business and her independence. There were no obvious signs of distress or fear, no cryptic messages or calls for help. If she was facing serious threats or harassment, she had chosen not to make them public on the platforms where she was most visible and articulate. At the same time, investigators discovered that Vipin's mother, Daya, had also been active on Instagram, contradicting the family's claims that they objected to social media use on principle. This revelation undermined one of the key motives alleged for the harassment campaign and raised questions about the accuracy of other claims made by both sides in the case. As the investigation continued through the late summer and early fall of 2025, the pressure on all parties involved intensified. The media attention had transformed a local tragedy into a national story, with everyone from women's rights activists to social media experts weighing in on the case. The Bhati family found themselves subjected to intense public scrutiny, their every statement analyzed and criticized. Meanwhile, Nikki's family faced the additional burden of maintaining their allegations while dealing with their grief and loss. On September 11, 2025, the Chief Judicial Magistrate's Court rejected bail pleas from all 4 accused individuals. The court's decision was based on the gravity of the charges and the ongoing nature of the investigation, but it also sent a clear signal that the judicial system was taking the case seriously. Vipin, his parents, and his brother would remain in custody, while investigators continued their work to uncover the truth about Nikki's death. The bail rejection represented a significant victory for those who believed that Nikki had been murdered, but it also highlighted the continuing uncertainties surrounding the case. The court had not determined guilt or innocence. It had simply concluded that the seriousness of the allegations warranted keeping the accused in custody while the investigation continued. The fundamental questions about what had happened on August 21st remained unanswered. As investigators continued their work, they faced the challenge of separating truth from speculation in a case that had generated intense public interest and strong emotions on all sides. The electronic evidence was being analyzed by forensic experts, witnesses were being re-interviewed, and new leads were being pursued. But with each new development, the case seemed to become more complex rather than clearer. The video footage that had initially seemed so damning was proving to be more ambiguous than first believed. While it clearly showed Nikki engulfed in flames, it did not provide clear evidence of how the fire had started or who was responsible. The audio of Kanchan's voice could be interpreted in multiple ways, and her subsequent statements to police had been somewhat inconsistent, raising questions about the reliability of her testimony. The medical evidence remained similarly contradictory. The hospital records documenting Nikki's injuries were consistent with either an explosion or deliberate immersion in flammable liquid. The forensic analysis of the crime scene had found no clear evidence of a gas cylinder explosion, but it had also failed to find conclusive proof of deliberate arson. The physical evidence, which should have provided the foundation for a strong case, instead raised more questions than it answered. As we examine this case, we are confronted with the troubling reality that truth is often more elusive than we would like to believe. The age of social media and digital evidence has given us new tools for documenting and investigating crimes, but it has also created new opportunities for manipulation and misinterpretation. A single video, a few Instagram posts, a collection of text messages, these fragments of digital life can be assembled into compelling narratives, but they may not always reflect the complete truth. The Nikki Bhati case forces us to confront difficult questions about the nature of evidence, the reliability of witnesses, and the influence of public opinion on criminal investigations. In an age where social media can make anyone famous, and where public pressure can influence official decisions, how do we ensure that justice is based on facts rather than emotions? How do we separate the truth about what happened from the stories we want to believe? At the same time, the case highlights very real issues about the status of women in modern Indian society. Whether or not Nikki was murdered, her story reflects the challenges faced by countless women trying to balance traditional expectations with modern aspirations. The tension between family honor and individual independence, between collective responsibility and personal autonomy, these conflicts are playing out in households across India every day. The allegations of dowry harassment, restrictions on business activities, and violence against women who refuse to submit to male authority are not unique to this case. They represent patterns of behavior that women's rights activists have been documenting and fighting against for decades. Even if the specific allegations against the Bhati family prove to be unfounded, the broader issues raised by the case remain critically important for Indian society. As the investigation into Nikki Bhati's death continues, we are left with more questions than answers. Was she the victim of a premeditated murder, killed for refusing to abandon her independence and success? Or was she the tragic victim of a household accident, her death transformed into a murder case by grief, family tensions, and media attention? The truth may ultimately prove to be more complex than either of these narratives suggests. What we know for certain is that a young woman with dreams, ambitions, and thousands of social media followers died in agony on August 21st, 2025. Whether her death was the result of deliberate violence or tragic accident, it represents a loss not just for her family, but for all those who saw in her success a symbol of women's potential for independence and achievement. The case also reminds us of the power and the danger of the digital age in which we live. Nikki's Instagram account, with its carefully curated images of success and beauty, provided a platform for her business and a means of self-expression. But it may also have contributed to the tensions that allegedly led to her death. In an age where our digital selves are increasingly important, we must consider the real-world consequences of our online lives. As we wait for the investigation to reach its conclusion and for the courts to render their final judgment, we are challenged to think more deeply about the society we are creating and the values we are promoting. Are we building a world where women can truly achieve independence and success without fear? Are we creating systems of justice that can distinguish between truth and speculation, between evidence and emotion? The story of Nikki Bhati, beauty entrepreneur and social media success, reminds us that behind every glamorous Instagram post, every business success story, every symbol of modern achievement, there are real human beings dealing with complex pressures and difficult choices. Her death, whether murder or accident, represents a tragedy that demands our attention, our compassion, and our commitment to building a more just and equitable society. In the end, perhaps the most important lesson from this case is not about guilt or innocence, but about the need for vigilance in protecting the vulnerable, supporting the ambitious, and ensuring that the promise of modern India extends to all its citizens, regardless of gender, regardless of family expectations, and regardless of the tensions between tradition and progress that continue to shape our national conversation. The next time you see a young woman's success story on social media, remember Nikki Bhati and the price that some pay for daring to dream beyond the boundaries others set for them. Remember that justice requires not just investigations and trials, but a commitment to creating a society where success is celebrated rather than punished, where independence is supported rather than suppressed, and where every person has the right to pursue their dreams without fear of violence or retaliation. This is the story of beauty and betrayal, of dreams and destruction, of the complex reality behind the carefully curated images we see on our screens. It is a story that continues to unfold, a mystery that may never be fully solved, but a reminder that in our search for truth and justice, we must never forget the human cost of the conflicts that divide us and the tragedies that diminish us all.